refunds and bigger paychecks and permanent pro-growth tax policy. And it will make it easier to build, to invest, produce, and hire in America. Our economy is in the middle of a historic construction boom that means new jobs and opportunities for working class Americans. Factory activity grew every month this year and reached its highest level since May of 2022. Equipment investment rose 17%, and investment in intellectual property rose 11% in the first quarter of this year. In the same period, economic growth was driven by two things: investment and exports. Republican policies are making investing in America a solid bet for companies after decades of America's manufacturing power declining. The president's tax and trade policies work hand in glove to fuel the economic investment that creates great paying jobs. Reciprocal trade agreements have secured $10 trillion in investment commitments in leading industries, opened new markets formerly hostile to U.S. exports, and made our trading relationships fairer for American workers, farmers, manufacturers, and producers. American producers exported, just last year, a record $3.4 trillion. And in the first 3 months of this year, U.S. exports were over $300 billion each month. That's the highest in 250 years of our country's history. America is becoming less dependent on China, a goal long promised by Washington politicians with no actual progress until President Trump. Our trade deficit with China fell 32% last year to the lowest level since 2004. The Chinese recently agreed to purchase at least $17 billion annually in U.S. agriculture products through 2028, alongside more Boeing airplanes. President Trump and Republicans in Congress repealed the de minimis privilege that mostly benefited Chinese companies, shipping products undercutting American producers and manufacturers. Our economic security is a cornerstone of our national security, and therefore must not be abused by bad actors. Yet this committee's investigation into U.S.-based non-for-profits revealed many are funded or operate under the influence of foreign countries like China. And they sow division and chaos in our communities that weakens America and strengthens foreign adversaries. Tax-exempt status is a privilege, not a right. We have called on the IRS to investigate and, if necessary, revoke the tax-exempt status of 11 different organizations who are the focus of our investigation. It is critical that the IRS take close look at tax-exempt organizations with documented histories of activity that destabilizes society and supports terrorism. Looking ahead, our tax policies must continue to make our economy the most competitive for innovative sectors of the future, including digital assets and the over 60 million Americans who own cryptocurrency. America needs clear, modern tax rules to ensure we remain the crypto capital of the world. Next week, we will be holding a legislative hearing on policies that offer solutions to pressing issues surrounding digital asset taxation. Mr. Secretary, I know you are a strong advocate for ensuring Main Street shares in the prosperity of our economy. And I look forward to hearing how Treasury is implementing the working families tax cuts so that Americans who power our economy, workers, small businesses, farmers, manufacturers, and producers and innovators have a brighter future. I now recognize the gentleman from Massachusetts, the ranking member.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Secretary, welcome, as always. The chairman made the point that this is the best committee in Congress. That's likely to be one of the few things we agree upon this morning, as all know. And you hold, as I pointed out in the past, one of the most important jobs in the world as a successor to Alexander Hamilton. We hope that there'll be some explanations this morning about the failures of many of the economic promises that were made by the Trump administration. 70% of the American people disagree with the economic direction that the country has taken. Last time you visited with us, Americans were being socked with price hikes because of the tariffs, where you and I met in front of the Supreme Court that day when the Supreme Court took and heard the oral arguments because of the big, ugly bill. We fought on our side every step of the way, knowing and predicting what was to come. Higher costs, millions kicked off of health care, children going hungry, all in service to the wealthiest amongst us. Despite this, a rosy picture was painted about the Trump economy and what it might deliver. It's safe to say that almost on every front, those predictions from the administration have been wrong. Workers and families are being forced to stretch their dollars further every day, and the pain so clearly stems from many of these projects, including what was supposed to be a cessation of endless wars. We've watched the price hikes that are coming because of this tariff regime. And during testimony last year, you suggested that the Trump policies would lift the working and middle class and reinvigorate American manufacturing. It was stated that take-home pay and wages would increase. You relied upon consumer confidence data to tout the strength of the economy. You pointed out that inflation was improving and that costs, including food, energy, and shelter, would be coming down. And now we have a chance to reflect upon what actually happened, including the slow walking of the tariff refunds that are due. Families are forced to shell out $1,700 more last year to cover many of the costs that were estimated to be rosy here not that long ago. Between the tariffs, the Iran war, prices are rising faster than they have in years. Last month, the inflation rate ate up paychecks. Appreciated the chairman's position on pointing out that there has been a routine of 3% increases, but when you're paying more for everything else, that quickly goes away. The price of a tank of gasoline in many places has gone up by almost 50%. That's a staggering amount. And despite the bullish assessment in January that economic growth would hit 5.4% in the fourth quarter, that growth came in at approximately 0.5%, not even a full percentage point. That's not spin, those are facts. The administration continues to argue that down is up and to convince people that their pain should be subjugated to patriotic causes. Whether celebrating higher credit card delinquencies on households, they're spending more every day because of the economic policies of the administration. As if the $1,700 to cover the tariffs wasn't enough, estimates are now showing that the war in Iran has already cost households another $750. And while an extra $200 in gas costs might not be a lot for some folks in the administration, it sure is for a lot of working families. I'm sure we're going to hear that there are many attempts to save the economy by touting the refunds. Those refunds were eaten up almost overnight because of increases in gasoline prices. Tax refunds fell short of the promises by 65% and have been completely wiped out, as I noted, by price hikes. The president's attention remains everywhere but what's most important. As he said, he's not thinking about people's financial situations. He tends to be focused on more vanity projects, including a ballroom and an arch, and painting the reflecting pool. We are now ready for a cage fight on the South Lawn and perhaps a $250 bill with his photograph on it. We look at what has happened recently with the slush fund that was created, and our Republican colleagues continue to go wobbly on their defense, perhaps not understanding how this is playing with the American people. I know the administration has been busy trying this week to explain all of it, telling members of Congress that the slush fund is dead, apparently not consistent with what the president offered but 24 hours ago. Let's be real. The $250 bill might be needed because of the price hikes that are coming to the American people. Americans have made this very clear. 77% say the policies have increased the cost of living, and more than half say it's worse than they can previously remember. Consumer sentiment is currently at a record low. The savings rate for American has dropped to 2.6%, cut in half in just a year. When we look at this economy, we see failure upon failure. The policies that have been proposed have really not worked for average Americans. Families are getting crushed, and we would suggest today that a new course of action needs to be taken. Republicans have made it clear that they don't want to put a stop to the chaos. But Democrats are unwavering in our fight for American families to lower cost and to end the harm that is being done. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Ranking Member. Today's sole witness is United States Secretary of the Treasury, Scott Bessent. The committee has received your written testimony, and it will be part of the formal hearing record. Secretary Bessent, you have 5 minutes to deliver your remarks, and you may begin when you're ready.
Good. Chairman Smith, Ranking Member Neal, and members of the committee, thank you for convening today's hearing. I'm grateful for this opportunity to discuss President Trump's 2027 budget, which builds on this administration's progress in unleashing a new era of economic expansion. I last appeared before this committee just a few weeks before the House passed the Working Families Tax Cuts. So on the heels of the most successful filing season in IRS history, I'd be remiss if I did not begin by thanking the committee for helping to deliver this once-in-a-generation bill to the president's desk. This tax day, under President Trump, we celebrated how much more money hardworking Americans kept, not how much the government took. Over 62 million tax returns claimed at least one of President Trump's signature new tax cuts. No tax on tips, no tax on overtime, deductibility of American car interest loans, and an enhanced deduction for low and middle income seniors. All told, the average refund increased by over 11%, with total refunds increasing by 18%. But as important as what the legislation achieves, it is what it prevented. If opponents of the Working Families Tax Cuts had had their way, our economy would have absorbed the largest tax hike in its history, over $5 trillion. 90% of American taxpayers would have seen their standard deduction slashed, while 40 million families would have seen their child tax credit halved. Instead, this committee held the line, and the American people had a better tax day because of it. Notably, President Trump's pro-growth policies don't stop at putting more money back in the pockets of working and middle-class families. They extend to placing the American dream within closer reach of their children. For context, nearly 40% of Americans have no exposure to U.S. equities, no stakes in the companies they helped to build. Trump accounts represent a profound reimagining of that arrangement. They will ensure that every American child can benefit from private ownership and compound growth, that every American child, in short, is born a shareholder. To date, nearly 6 million Trump accounts have been opened, with 1.4 million eligible for the $1,000 seed contribution from Treasury. Of course, as his tax cuts deliver relief for working-class Americans, President Trump's economic agenda is bolstered by two other distinct but reinforcing levers: trade and deregulation. Let me briefly address both of these in turn. First, the president is undeterred in his determination to open markets for U.S. goods and services while rebuilding U.S. manufacturing capacity. Over the 12 months ending March 2026, the trade deficit for goods declined by $370 billion compared to the same timeframe ending March 2025. The economy has added 313,000 net new private sector jobs and 13,000 manufacturing jobs in the past 2 months. Firm capital expenditures rose at an annual rate of over 17% in the final quarter, and companies are investing trillions to build and expand here at home. American industry is winning again to the benefit of American workers. A whole-of-government approach, meanwhile, is coupling our manufacturing revival with a great regulatory reset. Properly calibrated regulation is essential for economic growth, capital formation, employment, and higher wages. So at the outset of this administration, President Trump set the ambitious benchmark of slashing 10 existing regulations before issuing a new one. In 2025, we shattered that goal with a ratio of 129-1, and as a result, the regulatory actions generated more savings last year than in those of the prior Trump administration combined. Separately, any one of these initiatives on trade, tax cuts, and deregulation would be substantial. Taken together, they are transformative. Before President Trump took office, our trading partners exploited America's markets, our regulatory state smothered businesses, and our tax code was poised to punish workers and job creators. Today, his policies are driving lower taxes, bigger paychecks, and broader prosperity. So I thank this committee for its partnership in this critical work, and I look forward to building upon our strides through the President's budget for the year ahead. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll now proceed to the question and answer session. Mr. Secretary, yesterday in the Senate, you received a lot of questions from the Democrats over the anti-weaponization fund, which Acting Attorney General Todd Blanche said on the record is dead. You also told the Senate Finance Committee over and over and over and over a few more times again that you cannot discuss the settlement or the case due to ongoing litigation. Can you please set the record straight right at the top of this hearing so members do not need to use their limited time asking you questions you cannot answer? What is the status of the fund, the settlement agreement, and what part did IRS CEO Mr. Bisignano play in both?
Thank you for this question, Mr. Chairman. I said yesterday that Einstein's definition of insanity is asking the same question over and over again and expecting a different answer. Let me be clear, as we've done throughout this matter, the Department of Treasury is following the direction of the Department of Justice. Acting Attorney General Todd Blanche testified on Tuesday that the government will not be moving forward with the fund. We intend to comply with that direction and Attorney General Blanche's direction. I do not have any details into what that means at this time, but I will note that even the Acting Attorney General Blanche's statement Tuesday, this matter is still subject to ongoing litigation, so I'm unable to comment further on it. That means I'm also not able to discuss any part of the settlement agreement. As with all department litigation, the Department of the Treasury and the IRS are represented by the Justice Department, so any additional questions about the settlement or the fund should be directed to Acting Attorney General Todd Blanche. To your point about Mr. Bisignano, while I cannot speak on his behalf, I will note that the settlement agreement calls for the United States to issue an apology to the plaintiffs for, among other things, leaking their tax returns. Mr. Chairman, President Trump is a great American who has endured over 10 years of harassment and weaponization from all levels of government. No American should be targeted for political reasons.
Thank you, Secretary, for starting out with that information. This tax filing season was the most historic because of the tax relief delivered to working class families through the Working Families Tax Cuts. How much total tax relief did Americans get just this tax season?
Approximately $325 billion, Mr. Chairman.
And how much did the average individual tax refund increase?
The average refund increased by more than 11%, but that does not reflect the dollar value. As the ranking member likes to say, we overpromised and underdelivered. That is incorrect because so many people owed taxes last year that the dollar increase was actually much larger, going from negative to positive. As I travel the country, I have so many taxpayers who thank me because they had to pay last year and they got a refund this year.
So how many taxpayers claimed at least one of President Trump's priorities of no tax on tips, no tax on overtime, no tax on Social Security, or the auto loan interest?
Approximately 62 million filers, or about 44%, Mr. Chairman.
And so what percent of tax filers who received a tax cut in filing season earned less than $100,000?
Just over 70%, sir.
70%.
70.
So what percent of waiters and other tipped workers who received a tax cut, thanks to the no tax on tips, earned less than $100,000.
90%.
90.
90.
That's helping people that need it the most. Funny, Democrats always claim that the working families tax cuts were for billionaires. Mr. Secretary, I'm sure you know a lot of billionaires. Do you know any billionaires that was able to use the no tax on tips deduction?
I have plenty of billionaires I give tips to, but not monetary tips, sir.
Do you know of any billionaires that was able to use the no tax on overtime deduction?
No, sir.
Absolutely not. But you'll hear all day today that this tax cut was for the billionaires. But the evidence proves differently, and so I greatly appreciate that. I'm sure we will hear about inflation in the economy today, too. And so at this point, during President Biden's term, what was the core inflation rate?
6.2%, which led us to the worst inflation in 49 years, sir.
Absolutely. And was the highest under Biden? What was the highest?
6.6.
6.6.
September of 22.
And so what is core inflation this very second?
2.8%.
2.8%. But at this time, during the Biden administration, it was 6.2?
Yes, sir.
Wow. You wouldn't think that was the case based on the rhetoric coming from the other side, but that's what we're going to get. The Working Families Tax Cuts renewed and revamped the Opportunity Zone programs to ensure that rural communities get their share of the benefits. The law provides incentives that will drive an estimated $100 billion in new investments into rural communities, helping small businesses and working families in underserved, often overlooked areas of the country. How is the Trump administration implementing this improved Opportunity Zone program to ensure rural communities that I represent are in fact benefiting in the way Congress intended? And how is Treasury utilizing the new transparency requirements within the program to reinforce this effort to target those underserved communities?
Mr. Chairman, as someone who grew up in a rural community, I'm very excited by the prospect of these opportunity zones being available there. I think it is new and important seeing the success, and I'm also excited by the permanence. And I would also point out that many members from the other side of the aisle have called Treasury concerned about losing opportunity zones in their districts or states in the case of senators. And I pointed out to them that they voted against them, but we will work with them on these opportunity zones. Congress wanted to reach all levels, and we are working on transparency requirements, which are critical because to make sure that the investment is reaching the rural communities, small businesses, and local projects.
Thank you. On January 5th, 2026, through the hard work of both you and your staff, the Treasury Department secured a side-by-side agreement that largely exempts U.S. headquartered multinational enterprises from the OECD's income inclusion rule and undertaxed payments rule. This is a major win for U.S. tax sovereignty. How confident are you that this agreement will be respected and fully implemented by OECD members, particularly in the European Union?
I believe that we have the tools necessary that if our sovereignty is not respected, to counteract any failures to enact this. And I believe this is important because with this, the money comes into the U.S. Treasury rather than foreign treasuries, Mr. Chairman.
What I would say, Secretary, you can count on us as working hand in glove as allies, because Congress can also move legislation to make sure that they honor this. And we're willing to do that if they do not honor your commitment.
And Mr. Chairman, I will point out that my friend Senator Wyden complimented the side-by-side when he was back in Oregon recently.
It's great to hear. What monitoring has Treasury put in place to ensure that U.S. companies are not still subjected to the discriminatory treatment?
We frequently meet with the companies, and we have active engagement with the OECD on this matter.
Thank you. I now recognize the ranking member.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A reminder that members of the committee, they get to decide how to allocate their 5 minutes as long as they're within the framework of the questions that they wish to ask. So, Mr. Secretary, were you or any employee of Treasury informed of the settlement that the Attorney General entered into with the plan of the fund?
Again, Congressman, there's ongoing litigation, and as I said, I'm unable to answer.
Fine. So, I think we could agree upon this. There were 400,000 taxpayers that had their tax information leaked when Charles Littlejohn released that information. We all agree no citizen should have their taxpayer information leaked. That's a clear violation. But if we follow the logic of what has been proposed, then the suggestion would be that these 400,000 people would be never subject to any sort of IRS oversight?
Again, I'm unable to comment on that.
Okay. So let me go back to part of the statistical data that's been gathered. With Barnstable, Massachusetts, which is a central hub on Cape Cod for commercial and transportation activity, they rely upon tourist dollars. It's a big deal. Over the last year, there's been a 54% decrease in Canadian tourists. We're slow walking the tariff refunds. You and I were there, as I reminded the audience today, when the Supreme Court heard those arguments, and the suggestion was that the tax refunds were going to proceed expeditiously. That is not happening. There have been arguments that somehow that they've been slow walked on purpose because they did cost $166 billion, which would come from revenue that previously had been allocated. In Las Vegas, those who fly into the Harry Reid Airport, 4.9 million people flew in last year. That's down by 12%. The positions that we have taken on the tariffs, the positions that we have taken on trade, have really been inconsistent with previous presidents and previous administrations. We understand how tariffs might be used to penalize an adversary, but the application of these tariffs are not working for the American family because of the price increases that are being experienced, particularly in the agricultural states where we can see where much of the political turmoil is now playing out. Ground beef is up by 20%. As I noted earlier, gasoline, 51%. Airfares have spiked by 20%. And everywhere that we turn, there's a price hike because of the economic policies that the president has embraced. Inflation has hit 3.8%. We've watched how now perhaps we're going to change the independence of the Federal Reserve Board for the purpose of complying with some political suggestions. Let me suggest here that we think that the independence of the Federal Reserve Board, and in fact, the independence of the former chairman of that board, helped to guide us through a very rocky period of time. We watched how that service was denigrated time and again, despite the fact that it was an honest, patriotic effort that was made by that chairman to get us through, again, a very, very difficult period of time. But if we don't like the outcome with the Consumer Price Index, we get rid of the forecaster. If we don't like the result of what the Federal Reserve Board has said, then we threaten and intimidate the chairman of the Federal Reserve Board. The argument has been, since your last visit, that lowering costs was something that we all embraced, but there's a fundamental acknowledgement, and it is not happening. I cited a previous statistic that I think remains very compelling this morning. 77% of the American people disagree right now with the economic positions that are being embraced by the administration. With that, I yield back my time.
Thank you, Mr. Buchanan.
Thank you for being here today, Mr. Secretary. Passing the working family tax cuts was a major win for all Americans. In addition to the record tax refunds that millions of Americans have received, I'm especially excited about the law as it pertains to small business. 100% Bonus depreciation for business investment will boost the economic growth in manufacturing by encouraging small business to invest in America. Someone that's been in business for a lot of years, I can tell you the reality is very much the case. In addition, the permanent 199A small business deduction will make it easier for small businesses to create jobs and reinvest in their corporations or operations. More than anything else, I'm excited about the fact that we made a lot of this permanent. It'll make a huge difference going forward, and it has already. Working families' tax cuts are ensuring that American businesses can thrive and grow in the economy. I had the good fortune of being chairman of the Florida Chamber. We had 130,000 businesses, and these tax things, I can tell you, make a big difference. And the guy who's, Mark, who's CEO, made that reference to me many times. Mr. Secretary, the small businesses in my district tell me 100% bonus depreciation is so important that that decision is key to their buying equipment and other things. What's your thoughts on that, or your experience on the bonus depreciation part?
Congressman, I believe that the bonus depreciation, the full deductibility of the equipment is one of the greatest driving forces we are seeing in our manufacturing and, in fact, our Main Street revival. And I think equally important is the permanence. The Republican Congress made this permanent, so great certainty, and the 20% pass-through rate is also made permanent, is giving small business permanence.
Can you touch on 199A? That's a big thing for a lot of people in the district. It levels the playing field with the corporations where they got cut 35 to 21 or whatever, or 20, but this will give that 20% will make a big difference. But I wanted to get your thoughts and what you're seeing.
Yes, sir. It gives the average small business about $7,000 more per year, and the small business deduction cuts taxes for 8 million small business owners by $4,600. And again, what is important here is the certainty and the permanence. It allows the small businesses to hire, to invest, and plan for the future.
And then let me just touch on in my district, being in Florida, we have a lot of, obviously, seniors, one of the, I think, the 5th most seniors in the country in terms of that. And they're excited about this cut. I think it's 200,000 seniors that I have in my district, but the number is a huge number across the country. Where is that at today? And I think more importantly to me, or one of the big things, is to making sure we're talking to a lot of our seniors, because most of them are taking advantage, but my sense of it is not all of them are taking advantage. What are we doing to communicate with the seniors that haven't taken advantage of the opportunity?
Congressman, I was just down at the Villages in Florida, the largest retirement community, not in the United States, but in the world. And I cannot tell you the enthusiastic reception that them being able to keep most of their Social Security has made. And these are not the well-to-do people, maybe at the Villages, but in general, that when we saw the senior deduction, 68% of the filers made less than $100,000, and 96% of the filers, 96%, make less than $200,000.
Yeah, for many years I'd go to these hearings or different meetings that we'd be involved in, many times with senior organizations, and they always complained or thought about, when are we going to address, we've paid taxes once on Social Security, we got to pay it again. So that's a big deal, but I just want to make sure we're doing everything we can to communicate with them so they can take advantage of it. Most have, but there's many that haven't. But thanks for your leadership and all you've done for the country.
Good, thank you, sir. And Treasury is working with Social Security Administration to make sure everyone is taking advantage of this.
With that, I yield back.
Thank you. Mr. Doggett.
During your tenure as Treasury Secretary, has the IRS recommended that any taxpayer be granted immunity from an audit for their taxes?
Again, one portion of that is under litigation, so I'm not able to.
Yes, sir. It isn't a question of being not able, it's being not want to. But my question
no,
is
about, as I said,
thank you, sir.
There is litigation.
Reserving my time, my question to you again is,
definition of insanity,
in the
sir.
ordinary practice of the Treasury Department, has there ever been a recommendation that a taxpayer be granted immunity from an audit of their taxes?
sorry, what was that?
Same question. Has the IRS recommended that any taxpayer be granted immunity from an audit of their taxes?
Again, I'm unable to answer that.
You can answer it. You refuse to answer. Can you tell the American people, in the history of the Treasury Department, has there ever been a taxpayer who's been recommended to have immunity from an audit of their taxes?
Has there ever been a taxpayer who had his tax returns released, his
Thank you.
family, and every
So
employee?
I'll take that as a
every
no.
employees.
Let me ask you, sir,
Congressman,
since
if
you
you'd like
say
to
you're
apologize
relying
to the president
Thank you. I
and all
reserve
his
my-
employees today. I
maintaining
would
my
join you
time,
in that.
and since you refuse to answer, let me ask you, since you say you're following the advice of the Attorney General, the former criminal defense attorney for Mr. Trump, as you know, the Attorney General cannot compromise a tax dispute unless it's referred to him from the IRS for prosecution or defense. Have you ever been involved in any way in a decision to refer a tax dispute to the Attorney General?
Again, I cannot comment on that.
You can't comment. Your argument here that you can't comment in this case makes as much sense as President Trump saying that he cannot. I understand you want to talk over me, but you're not answering the question, because you may have defined insanity by referring to Einstein, but your appearance here today and yesterday in the Senate defines deception, and that's what you're doing to the American people. Isn't it correct, sir, that the financial management service within the Treasury Department must give approval before any payment can be made from the judgment fund?
Sir, we administer the payments.
Yes, sir. You give approval to it. And
No, sir, we administer them.
You make a sign-off on them being...
We administer them, just like if you tell your bank to wire money.
Did
your
Brian...
bank does not
Yes, sir.
say, do not pay, you shouldn't pay your Visa bill.
Did Brian Morrissey, who had been only confirmed by the Senate a few months earlier as Treasury General Counsel, do a good job for you? Can you answer that just with a yes or no?
Yes.
Yes, he did. And as you know, he abruptly resigned rather than be associated with the seedy Trump slush fund deal and didn't sign off on anything. Can you pledge to the committee? I'm asking you a question, sir, if you'd listen to it. Can you pledge to the committee that you will assure that no retaliation occurs against the career IRS employees who wrote the 25-page memo asking the Department of Justice to halt action on this outrageous audit immunity deal?
Sir, we follow the law.
Okay, well, will you follow the law and assuring the committee
always
that you
follow the
won't
law.
retaliate against those courageous career employees?
We always follow the law.
What's involved here, sir, is the most corrupt deal in American history. Truly incredible that a president of the United States could come in and sue the people of the United States for $10 billion and then walk off with an immunity deal that no other American has ever had, nor could they receive, and to get that immunity deal from his former criminal defense attorney, who he has appointed as acting attorney general. This is the kind of corruption that would permit the Trump family, if the Wall Street Journal is correct, that Trump earned $5 billion from his crypto bills last year, to be to pay him or not pay him as he feels it's smart to do. He made no complaint about the audits in his petition, and yet suddenly out of nowhere, he's granted immunity in what some have said in a report would be $100,000 benefit, $100 million benefit to him. You know that there is a responsibility of your department to do audits of the president every year. A report of this committee indicates that only one was begun during the first term. What are you doing to assure that those annual audits occur this year? The first term, 3 years, nothing. Has anything been done this year to fulfill that responsibility?
Again, sir, due to IRS...
I'm not talking about...
IRS Rule 6103, which prohibits the discussion of taxpayer information.
It doesn't...
This is how we got there with Mr. Littlejohn.
Yes, sir. It doesn't prohibit you indicating what you are doing to assure
Congressman.
complicity with the law and with the practice, long-standing practice of the Internal Revenue Service. So I think we can assume from your deception today that nothing's being done, and this president is being treated in a way that no other president, no other American citizen has ever been treated.
I would agree with that,
in an incredibly corrupt deal.
I would
yield
agree
back.
he is being treated the way no other person has ever been treated.
Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Secretary, for being here today. I think these conversations are certainly enlightening, and
Circular.
Maybe sometimes even entertaining to hear some of the items that are brought up, if it weren't so sad. But I appreciate many of my colleagues whom I respect speaking out against tariffs. Let me remind folks that after all the criticism of President Trump during his first term relating to tariffs, a few other things too, but in this case tariffs, unified Democratic control for 2 years resulted in no action on tariffs, and quite honestly, disengagement on trade altogether that I think brought disrespect to our country, and I think damaging in many ways. But I'll move on here to talk more about tax, and certainly the Treasury's recent interagency agreement with the Department of Education to address the ongoing costs to taxpayers associated with the Biden administration's student loan policies. Last year, I joined several colleagues in urging Treasury to rescind the waiver which prevented collection on defaulted student loans. So this agreement takes an important step toward restoring accountability and protecting taxpayers. I certainly appreciate your partnership in the effort. You know, the Working Families Tax Cut bill was very productive, certainly teed up by the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act from the first Trump term. And it's interesting, you know, in the meantime, we had a bipartisan bill where we had many of my colleagues, both sides of the aisle, vote for so many things from the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. And then when we even added more middle-class advantages, whether it's Trump accounts, whether it's a school choice, whether it's the tax relief for overtime, likewise for seniors, I mean, the list goes on. But because there was no chance that President Biden would sign that, they voted against it. So when there was a chance that President Biden could have signed a bill, now it didn't get through the Senate obviously, but when that seemed to be the situation, they opposed it. So I just I get a little frustrated when we can have good discussions here in this room and legislate. I think it's important to note that there were so many inversions happening leading up to the Obama administration that even President Obama advocated for lowering the corporate tax rate. Now, he advocated a rate that didn't have enough support here. President Trump came in, he advocated for a considerably lower rate, and we legislated basically right in the middle. And it proved very effective economically, proved effective for growing revenues and growing because the economy grows. So anyway, I'm excited about the Trump accounts because I think those are going to be consequential, especially teaming up with the federal scholarship tax credit. Appreciate my colleague Blake Moore working with me to make permanent the Trump accounts because I think they are going to be very much appreciated by a lot of folks. A few years down the road especially, but I think even in the near term as people start thinking more about their financial future. Now, a lot's been said about various things and certainly the president, but I know that there's been quite a bit of chatter from the other side of the aisle regarding the president's investments. I'm just wondering if you could set the record straight on this and explain how there have been mischaracterizations during the process and mischaracterizations of the law, perhaps.
I want to be very clear on this. President Trump's investment holdings are maintained exclusively in fully discretionary accounts managed by independent third-party institutions who have sole and exclusive authority over all investment decisions, including asset allocation, trading, rebalancing, and portfolio management. They receive no advance notice of trades, cannot alter or override the manager's strategies or models, and unlike Congress, this was intentionally designed to maintain a clear separation between President Trump and the independent third-party investment managers overseeing his account.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. And let me just close by saying that the American people are wanting us to have good conversations, thoughtful conversations, reasonable conversations, and I think thoughtful and reasonable individuals know that what we did with our tax policy has been good. Thank you for your role in that, and I want us to work together for the betterment of our economy moving forward just as the American people would expect us to do. Thank you. I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Secretary, thank you for being with us today. You were here a year ago. You came before the committee, and you closed your testimony by saying the president's bold leadership had laid the foundation for what you called a golden age economy. More recently, you said the economy could grow by at least 3.5% this year, and that Americans would see a non-inflationary boom. Mr. Secretary, I've searched hard to find constituents in my district who believe that this economy is golden. In fact, many of them are struggling more today than they were the last time you were in front of this committee. Personal savings are shrinking, disposable income is down, and families are paying more and more for basic necessities. So I would like to ask you a couple of yes or no questions about this golden economy. Electricity bills are up 8.5%. Is that golden?
Sir, you can ask
Yes or no?
You can ask
Yes
me a
or
question.
no?
You can't tell me how to answer it. So,
Okay, let me put it this way, Mr. Secretary, because you're obviously not here to answer questions.
I am here to
You're
answer
It's
questions.
my time, Mr. Secretary. It's my time. Health insurance costs are up 26%. That's not golden. Child care costs are up 9%. That's not golden. Gas prices are up nearly 50%. That's not golden. Grocery prices are still straining family budgets. That's not golden. Mr. Secretary, working families don't feel like they're living through a golden age. And while H.R. 1 may have delivered modest tax cuts for some Americans, many families are seeing those savings wiped out by higher costs everywhere they shop. Is that what this administration considers a golden age? And it's rhetorical, so you don't even have to try and talk over me. Secretary, Mr. Secretary, what should I tell my constituents when they ask about these costs? Farmers who are being hit by high costs of fuel and fertilizers, who can't get their product to market because of the war in Iran. Tell them it's golden?
you should tell them that we've had 2.6% economic growth since President Trump took office, despite the Democratic...
These farmers are pretty smart, Mr. Secretary.
Well, the people in California, the one person...
Reclaiming my time. These farmers are pretty smart, Mr. Secretary, and they're not going to fall for that line. I understand your unwillingness to testify and answer questions about details regarding the IRS settlement with the Trump administration due to ongoing litigation. But at the end of the day, your department, the Treasury Department, and specifically the IRS, is going to have to carry out its demands. And let me be very specific about what those demands are. The settlement says the IRS is prevented from raising any and all claims against the president with respect to any tax return filed before May 19th, 2026. So, Mr. Secretary, as the head of the Treasury Department, you will be in charge of carrying out the demands of this settlement. So let me present a real, true scenario for you. If on May 18th, President Trump files an amendment to his 2024 federal tax return, and the amendment says, quote, I'm owed an extra $10 billion. That's the amount he sued the IRS, that I forgot to claim on my tax return. Is it your opinion that the settlement agreement signed by Todd Blanche, the acting attorney general and President Trump's former personal attorney, would require you to pay President Trump $1 billion, no questions asked?
We will follow Justice Department's
Okay, you won't answer that either. Do you think this is something that the American people should know? How can you sit here and not provide any answers to the American people?
Because I follow the law,
it is
Congressman.
astonishing to me that the president didn't know about this deal before it was signed. Of course he knew about it. He directed it. So why not cash out on his get-out-of-jail-free card? As I read it, he can absolutely file an amendment to his tax return and claim a giant tax refund. And you have to sit there and watch while he robs the Treasury, and more important, while he robs the American people blind. That's as unacceptable as you refusing to answer questions posed to you by the members of this committee. I yield back.
Mr. Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Secretary, thanks for being here. As you know, the beatings will continue until morale improves.
Well,
this is the beginning of the Charles Dickens.
Given that the Democratic House has a 17% approval rate, now I see why.
No, this is the opening of a Charles Dickens novel, is it not? So it was the best of times, it was the worst of times. It was the age of wisdom, it was the age of foolishness. It was the epic of belief, it was the epic of incredulity. It was a season of light, it was a season of darkness, it was a spring of hope. It was the winter of despair. How well that describes what we're going through. I will remind my friends on the other side that we had double-digit inflation in the prior administration. The president inherited one of the worst situations he could possibly do. The cost of gasoline, by the way, in June of 2022 was, the average was $5.16 a gallon. As of June 4th, it's now $4.51 a gallon. So facts are a funny thing. Use the ones that actually are true or bend them to anything you want. What I really want to talk to you about, though, is part of what we did when we first did Tax Cuts and Jobs Act was something called opportunity zones. And I'm going to invite you to come to Erie, Pennsylvania. Erie, Pennsylvania was at one time a thriving city, but fell on very, very hard times. But when we did the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act with the opportunity zones, this encouraged private investment, not taxpayer dollars, but private investment going into areas where the government would have wasted its money, and does oftentimes, but say to private investors, you know what? Using the tax code, we're going to give you an opportunity to invest in something while other people would usually walk away from it. I got to tell you, in Erie, under the leadership of key stakeholders and local leaders such as the Erie Downtown Development Corporation and the strategy of Erie Refocus Plan, the city committed itself to a goal of revitalizing its downtown waterfront while building on its industrial heritage. Using opportunity zones as a catalyst, Erie has leveraged more than $40 million in private investment. This investment created 110 new residential units, revitalized more than 100,000 square feet of commercial space, restored 8 historic properties, and brought a grocery store to a neighborhood previously designated as a food desert. One of the things I wanted to talk about, because under this new plan, we decided, hey, you know what? We did some great jobs when it came to cities. Let's look at rural areas. So what I'm going to ask you to do, if you would, please come to Erie, where you can see how these things work in living color to real people in real time. How we're revitalizing a community. The job you've done is incredible, by the way. The only thing I question, what keeps you getting up in the morning and come into things like this when you know all that work that you do, all that time that you spend, all your staff works to make it better for the American people? The hell with this idea of it being a Republican idea or a Democrat idea. Why don't we just look like what's best for America?
Well, the representative, first of all, I have heard that Erie is the poster child in a great way for opportunity zones. So I look forward to coming and visit, and I look forward to visiting the rural areas in your district. And also, as I said earlier, many representatives, senators from the other side of the aisle have called me to ask for guidance on opportunity zones. I pointed out that they voted against them, but that is why I come in, to help the American people. We can overcome partisan differences, that they voted against them. It is in statute now, and we will make it work for all the American people.
You know what, and I appreciate that, so we'll get with you that, because I have 2 friends in the Senate right now that represent Pennsylvania. They are sometimes would have been described as polar opposites. They're not. So between Senator Fetterman and Senator McCormick, we have 2 people in the Senate now working together to do the best things that they can do for the state they represent and the nation that they work for. I think if we could twist things around, now unfortunately elections get in the way of us doing things that are actually beneficial to the American people. We tend to work on a party spectrum rather than the people we represent. As I said, I represent 750,000 people. None of them are, it's not an all red, it's not all blue, and in fact what discourages me is too many of our people who live in the area no longer have faith, and they don't even register to vote. But please, we're going to invite you. We're going to invite Senator Fetterman, Senator McCormick. We will get people there to sit down with you. There is such a wealth of opportunity taking place right now. The figures don't lie. Sometimes the liars can figure, but figures don't lie. Thank you for doing what you're doing in your private life, to walk away from that, to walk into this. When they first described it as a swamp, they had no idea how deep the swamp has become. Thank you for being here today, and thank you for your dedication to the United States of America.
Thank you, Mr. Larson.
Thank you, and thank you, Secretary, for joining us here today. It's always kind of unusual when you start a hearing and are instructed what you can say or can't say in an open and free democracy. But having said that, you mentioned in your testimony core inflation a couple of times. What's the difference between core inflation and inflation?
Many people believe, or it is in general, energy prices and food prices, which are much more fast-moving. And I would say that energy prices will roll down when this Iran conflict ends.
So is gasoline considered part of core inflation?
Yes, sir.
It is. So those remarks, core inflation reflects gasoline prices.
Core inflation, it reflects the underlying trend in inflation and whether that inflation has become endemic to the system as it did during President Biden.
Has the war in Iran had anything to do with core inflation?
Sir?
Does the war in Iran have anything to do with core inflation? Or you can't answer that, or either, or are we precluded from asking that?
Well, I'm not sure what the question is.
Let me make it as simple as I can. Does the war in Iran, are you with me? Does the war in Iran
thus far,
have witnessed the rise in gas prices as it caused?
Well, again, that is the regular inflation, and gas prices have gone up, which I believe will be temporary.
So gas prices have gone up, but you believe they're temporary.
Core inflation has dropped 0.5% since President Trump came to office.
Geez, you know, when I'm home in my district, I'm going to just tell those people, geez, you know what? You've missed this whole thing. Don't you understand core inflation? You guys are better off. I mean, these gas prices, I don't know what you people are thinking out there. For God's sake, you know, you should be doing cartwheels in the street over the price of gas. So what is the administration's plan to lower gas prices?
We've taken the many...
Are you in favor of eliminating the gas tax?
We have moved to...
Are you in favor of eliminating the gas tax?
We would like to work
Are you able to answer that, or is that not
Well, if I'm not interrupted, I can, Congressman.
Well, I'm waiting for your answer.
We have asked Congress to move to eliminate the gas tax. That is done through statute.
You have moved that. So you're in favor of eliminating the gas tax.
We have asked for that.
So we can join bipartisanly today because you're in favor to eliminate the gas tax.
Again, the White House has asked for it, sir.
They have? Why isn't it before the committee for a vote?
I don't run the agenda.
Well, it's good to hear that we're in favor of something that we can work on bipartisanly that will help relieve people who need it the most. Forgive me, but people in my district aren't doing cartwheels over this economy. They haven't seen the impact that you claim that they're all receiving. People hear a lot of rhetoric, et cetera, but that doesn't pay their grocery bills. That doesn't pay their heating costs. That doesn't put fuel in their tanks. That doesn't help them get through the day-to-day grind of their lives. And so coming here and filling us with platitude and telling us how grateful we should be to the Trump administration for everything that it's done,
well, Congressman,
is this war responsible for any of this?
Congressman, food at home is up 2.5% since President Trump took office.
Are we at war currently?
Which is twice.
Are we at
It's up
war
twice that
currently?
much every year under the Biden administration.
Are we at war currently?
That the conflict has been halted.
The conflict has been halted. So we're not at war. So our military is not involved. We're not at war.
Again, if you would like for me to call the Secretary of War, I can ask. I'm the Secretary
So
of
as part of the
Treasury.
administration, and as part of this, we're not at war. How in God's name, if we can't answer any questions at all, and I don't know, maybe there were some special orders where we're not allowed to these questions or not, we ought to make that clear. Are we at war or not? I'm asking as relation to the cost of going up for oil and gas. That hasn't risen?
Well,
has it risen because of the war?
It did rise because of the conflict, yes, sir.
The conflict. So that's what we call it. Our people go into battle and lose their lives.
Mr. Larson, your time has expired. Mr. Schweikert.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And just, Mr. Secretary, you were already heading there. As everyone here, I'm sure, knows, PCE, there's actually trimmed, which Kevin, new head of the Fed, prefers. There's actually 4 or 5 ways you do balancing on the calculations. So if any of you want joint economic, actually, we have a whole chart of how those calculations work. If anyone would like it.
Those will be facts, and they're inconvenient. And food prices, food at home, has risen 2.5% since President Trump came into office. It averaged more than 5%. 5% under the Biden-Warren economy. And I've got a list here that President Trump posted, but no one wants to talk about it. Last year, all we heard was eggs. Eggs are down 90%. Avocados are down 19%.
Mr. Secretary, you will find...
Avocado's probably more popular on the other side of the aisle.
Yeah, Mr. Secretary, you'll find we often choose whatever number works best for the social media posting we're going to do in an hour. So welcome to Congress. A conversation we've been having actually with some of your staff and some of the Ways and Means staff is something that often never comes up, but we're going to have to understand it and find a better way to document it. We calculate about 17% of the U.S. economy now is in the tax-exempt space. And within that space, those who receive the benefit of tax exemption, the basic concept is, here's the community good you're doing for not having to pay taxes. Okay. There's something you're an expert on, the 990 form that documents to the IRS, to Treasury, to Congress, what is that community benefit? I know your team has been working on this. I know some of the IRS team, we've been working on it. Is there a way to come up with a much more robust, universal form so we can understand, are these tax-exempt organizations meeting their societal obligation? And if they're not, we can help them meet that. But we don't have enough information today.
It's a great question, Congressman. And there are many tax-exempt organizations. A large part of the economy are hospitals and healthcare services. So we should look whether they are meeting the needs and are in fact nonprofits. But your question in terms of what is going on with these nonprofits, the IRS has issued guidance for Form 990 that nonprofits, just as banks must KYC, know your customer, we are telling the directors of these foundations, of these institutions, you must know your grantee. So KYG. If your grantee if the money is being used for violent activities, you as a trustee, as a fiduciary, are in trouble. If it is being used to take away people's civil rights, you are in trouble and the nonprofit status is in jeopardy.
My team looks forward to continuing to work with Treasury on making that more robust so we actually understand both those that are using nonprofit tax exempt as funnels to bad acts, but also are they meeting their community obligations? One that you're probably not going to get as a question from anyone else. We have a fixation of debt management. You know, we're responsible as policymakers. We're responsible for the debt, not the administration. We do make the policy. What can we do as members of Congress, Joint Economic Committee, Ways and Means Committee, to help you convince the markets, please buy a 10-year note. Please, we have some vision, the visibility to see where we're going. I do have some concerns of in the future where the entire world is binging on debt, that we have some stressed auctions. What do we do as a country to actually not have that happen to us?
So, since President Trump came into office, the U.S. Treasury market has been the best performing developed market, but that is not assured. It is assured that the Treasury will have a regular and predictable issuance cadence. But what we must let the borrowers know, people who are buying Treasury bonds, whether it is U.S. households, the foreign central banks, and everyone else in between, that we are serious about getting our debt and deficit numbers under control.
That is perfect, Mr. Secretary. And with that, I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Secretary. Secretary Bessent, as of April 18th, taxpayers received about 3.4 million delayed refund letters. Illinoisans received 110,000. Texans, Floridians, and New Yorkers each received over 200,000. And Californians received 400,000. Almost 3 months ago, on March 9th, Representative Sewell and I asked you for basic information to demonstrate that Americans are actually getting their delayed refunds. Last month, I requested a meeting with the appropriate staff at the IRS or Treasury for this information. It was not until this morning that I received a response from Treasury. And although the letter contains some high-level information, it is insufficient to reassure me that Americans are receiving their refunds quickly. For example, the information in this morning's letter is substantially outdated. Today's letter cited 2.2 million CP 553 e-notices when a separate document you sent me a few weeks ago cited 3.4 million notices as of April 18th. Also, the information in today's letter fails to convey the current number of unique taxpayers whose refunds were delayed. Nor does today's letter give a clear understanding of how quickly taxpayers are waiting on their delayed checks. So, Mr. Secretary, could you tell me when or before June 11th will you or your staff meet with Representative Sewell and me to walk us through the evidence that taxpayers with delayed refunds received the funds owed to them?
Microphone.
I have not seen the letter. That I will follow up on this, and the delays that you were talking about are for taxpayers who did not file electronically. We had about 98% of taxpayers file electronically. They received their refunds within 21 days. It sounds to me that out of the approximately 134 million tax returns that we received, that the April number would have been the
Thank you.
And we are at 2.2, so we are working through it, and much of that has to do with verification, lack of addresses. So we look forward to working with you on that because we are committed.
Well, thank you very much. Well, let me just continue. Mr. Chairman, could you assist me to make sure that the American people receives the information? 3.4 million delayed notices are getting their refunds expeditiously. And also, I'd like to submit for the record a state-by-state breakout provided to me by the Internal Revenue Service
where 3.4 million taxpayers live and whose refunds were delayed as of April 18th?
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And Congressman, what was that number last year?
3.4 million.
No. I meant for the previous filing season and the year before that.
Well, I don't know the number for either one of those years, but let me move to my last question. I understand that the Southern Poverty Law Center has been indicted. And let me ask, is the Internal Revenue Service involved in that activity in any way?
Again, that's ongoing litigation, but that would have been done, as I read in, what I know is what I've read in the newspaper, and that was the Justice Department and the FBI.
And Internal Revenue is not urging or suggesting to any other entities that they may lose their tax exemption if they contribute to the Southern Poverty Law Center?
Again, there's ongoing litigation, but that's driven by the Department of Justice and the FBI.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I give back.
Thank you, Mr. LaHood.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Secretary, welcome. Thank you for being here today. Thanks for your service. I want to touch on affordable housing. I think collectively, as we travel back to our districts, we continue to hear about the lack of affordable housing. And I would describe it as a rural, suburban, and urban problem. And last year, in the Working Families Tax Cut Bill, we included a number of provisions on affordable housing. And one of those was my bill that was included in there on the affordable housing tax credit. And as you're well aware, one of the most significant barriers to economic success in our communities is housing. And so in the Working Families Tax Cut Bill, we included the affordable housing tax credit, which includes a permanent 12% increase in the 9% allocation of LIHTC credits beginning this year. Independent analysis have estimated that this will lead to the development of more than 1.2 million more affordable homes nationwide over the next 10 years because of what we did. From your perspective and the Department of Treasury, what will the expansion of the affordable housing tax credits mean for working families struggling to afford housing?
The LIHTC provision specifically gives great predictability for investors and builders who want to go into the market, and I think we've already seen a pickup in those areas and with this program.
And Mr. Secretary, what do you see for, as we try to address this problem, other mechanisms within Department of Treasury or legislatively that we ought to be looking at?
Well, there are two housing bills, one in front of the House and one in front of the Senate, and that seem to be languishing.
I want to switch topics. I also, beyond being on the Ways and Means Committee, I serve on our Select Committee on China, which is a bipartisan committee focused on how do we win the strategic competition against the CCP. And I also serve on our Intelligence Committee. And I want to focus on 45X, and that's a provision in the tax code. And so last year in the Working Families Tax Cut Bill, we included the Foreign Entity of Concerns restrictions that pertain to curbing Chinese technology by manufacturers and mandating in that bill that they operate fully independent companies here with no reliance on Chinese entities. Despite these clear requirements, recent media reports indicate that many manufacturers continue to depend on the active support of Chinese engineers overseen by the CCP, security officers embedded in their U.S. facilities, undermining the objective of fully transferring operational knowledge of these technologies to U.S. companies. So, Mr. Secretary, what is Treasury doing to address and prevent Chinese penetration and involvement in these companies receiving the 45X tax credit?
So we are polling the companies. We are asking for very